I need to read the legal thing behind that agreement. I wonder if any of our audience member knows what the agreement is behind
No one
Zoom.
knows. Everyone just agrees too. We're so
We do
compliant.
to everything.
Everything.
Lord,
Yeah,
Lord knows I've given my first two grandchildren up to Apple with all the agreements I've just
No
agreed
doubt.
to.
No
yeah, without
doubt.
a doubt. Without a doubt.
Meanwhile, we're back at work going, don't you just check the box? Don't, you know.
And officially, I
Exactly.
never do. Never.
Meanwhile,
Allegedly.
yes, upload it to the cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is fun, guys. This is getting together. Hey, wait, James, for old time's sake, a quick story before we bring our guest in. New Orleans, 2022, July. LGA 192, 195. We're all there participating. I had a room. My room, I think it was a room. It might have been a closet because the mattress was in the bathroom. So every day I would, go out and get room in the aisle or the hallway. As I'm walking down, I noticed on the corner, somebody had rented out the whole corner suites. I mean, it must have been 8,000 feet, multiple floors and everything. I'm like,
this is so scary where this is headed, but continue.
No, true story. So every day I was admiring. I'm like, somebody from the LGA conference must have grabbed that suite because they were having breakfast hospitality, nighttime hospitality, networking events, and such like that. And finally, after day 3, as we're down in the exhibit hall, and I looked over at our guest booth, that compliance lady booth, and I'm looking, it says, please join us in our suite any day, anytime, between the hours of 8 a.m. or what. And I'm like, that's you at the end of the hall. That was, had I known, I would have crashed in there.
What a promo.
Massive lesson learned. Oh, am I on? Massive lesson learned to us because we should have had one of our signs out there. It never even, we were telling people about it. We were handing out little cards, and obviously we should have had a sign up there so people, because it would have been fun in that case for people if they just walked by to be able to stop in. It was fun. It was not 8,000 square feet, but it was.
Did
It
you
was nice to have that room.
you ever walk into the suite and Jimmy was just curled up on the couch? Did that ever happen? Yeah,
Eating the chips we left out
from the night before, just a bowl of guacamole. We are here. I swear, you never know when we're starting the show anymore. Erin,
no, we don't.
We're visited today by Erin McKay. You may know her as that compliance lady, and I was corrected this morning because I said, "Oh yeah, the compliance lady," and Jim said that.
No, that
compliance lady, and that makes a big difference.
It does. It does.
Erin, welcome to the show from Alaska. Hi.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm excited.
Are you nervous? Is this your first time
Not
on
at
a
all.
podcast? I'm just kidding.
Say that again.
Is this your first time on a podcast?
Is it?
No.
It might be, I think, actually.
Spoiler.
Other than
as
mine.
As a guest.
As a guest, yes.
Oh, let's please. Can we table that? Because
Oh.
I'm waiting with bated breath to dive deep into that.
Spoiler alert.
Okay.
Yeah, you like
But
it?
I do think it is actually.
Well,
okay.
No, I'm not nervous.
Good luck. We've talked about this. We have a support group. All the people with podcasts, we get together every once in a while, and it's funny when you end up being on someone else's podcast because you're used to having to shut up, right? I mean, like that's what you should do as a host, right? That's what we're told. That's what Jimmy tells me, and being on the other side, you kind of lay back, and then you're like, oh, I'm supposed to talk. So hopefully today will be a blast, man. So glad you're here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. We've gotten some great stories. I could go on for, as you know me, probably an hour or two just with some of the stories recently. But let's bring our audience in, Erin. And one thing that our audience has always told us that they love origin stories. Where that compliance lady started from. Where did it begin? Where did it grow? What's the garage? What's that called? Garage tool bench in the garage start.
It was my dad. The tool bench in the garage was my dining room table during COVID.
Amen.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
I have actually worked in the oil and gas industry for over 25 years, and most of my career has been in compliance of one sort or another, but it's earlier on it was environmental, water, wastewater, solid waste, that sort of thing, but it was kind of the same function. And I worked for Alaska Pipeline for almost 20 years, and partway through that,
Nice.
they had an opening for their DOT compliance person. And I used to say arrogantly, but it wasn't arrogant. It was naive. I was naive. And I applied for it and I said, oh, I know compliance inside out and backwards and I can do this. It's just a different program. And I had no idea how different it was from most of the other programs were more siloed and specific, and I didn't realize that the DOT, the PHMSA pipeline stuff was covered everything, training, operations, maintenance, public, the whole gamut. So I known, I probably would have still done it, but it was kind of a shock. So I did that for years and made all these connections throughout the industry and just loved the industry, loved the people, learned so much from going to conferences. But at my heart, my degree is in natural resources management, and I've always loved systems and processes. And one of the things that always drove me crazy was that I could see better ways to do things if you set up systems and processes. But when you work for an organization, your job is to support that function, and that doesn't give you time to kind of back up and develop these tools and resources and that sort of thing. And so a few years ago, I was ready to make the leap and left my job directly with a pipeline operator in August of 2019, of course, having no idea what was coming 6 months later.
Right.
Surprise.
Right.
And so spent a few months, I was kind of tired after working all those years, kind of took it easy a little bit and got everything set up with the company. And literally, in fact, I actually signed the contract to have the tool that we have developed on not only right at the beginning of COVID, but it was when, I don't know if everybody probably remembers, the price of oil dropped negative for a couple days
Yep.
in April of 2020. And that's actually when I signed there was a short time where I was like, am I crazy to spend money on this? But I thought, well, the industry is not going away. It might change, And so we signed the contract and started development. And actually the timing worked out fine because it was 2020 when we first started, and not, so it was a good time to the developer, amazing. I was really, really lucky. He's amazing. He's in Las Vegas, and I never met him until we went to Washington, D.C. for some meetings over a year later. Never met him in person, but we developed this entire tool. And so the timing was good, and it's taken, so now we're getting the word out and that sort of thing. But the compliance lady actually came from, the name of the business was Evergreen Compliance, which is not that there's nothing wrong with it. It's not that easy to remember though. It's like one of those, wasn't there somebody? And I was actually I was the photographer at a golf tournament up here in Anchorage, and there was a guy named Peter Machicki. He was actually the Senate president at the time, the Alaska Senate president, and he worked for ConocoPhillips, and we used to talk back and forth about things because our pipeline's connected with theirs, and we'd talk about who's doing what and are we covering everything. And so when his team came by the little booth to have their picture taken, I was chatting. I said, oh, I don't know if you remember me or not, but I worked with Hillcorp and we used to talk. And he was just very casual. He was walking away and he turned around. I said, well, of course I remember you. You're that compliance lady. And he kept walking. And later on or the next day, I was like, I bet you that's what most people think of me. It's
Yep.
like, I don't remember what her name is, but she's that compliance lady. And so I kind of put it out as a joke in a couple posts on LinkedIn, and people really picked up on it. And I thought, well, that's it. So anyway, we kind of switched from there, and it's been fun because people do remember it. And
Yeah.
in fact, I was at the Petroleum Club up here in Anchorage last night talking to some people, and we were joking about trying to see if we get the phone number like 1-800 compliance or 1-800, but I'm not going to do that. But it was funny to think about. So
That's
I
fantastic.
love that.
Jimmy, it reminds me of when we're out at the shows and people say, hey, it's the coffee guys. Like,
Yeah, they
Mhm.
really,
do.
that ends up being what the call is at the end of the
Well, and then
day.
it was funny last year sometime, one of the other neat things about Alaska is the whole state's like a small community, and
Yeah.
we literally run into our senators at the farmers market, and but it was I was actually at Costco with my daughter looking for something, and Peter Machicki happened to be standing on the other side of a thing looking at, iPads or something. And I told him that. He never knew. I said, just so you know, you're the reason we have this whole new like name for the
That's so
business we're
great.
doing. And he was just laughing.
That's great though. But I love that origin story because you know what though? That's real. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense because I mean, I remember the first time I heard it, I'm like, that's an interesting name. I won't forget that. That's something that
Hmm.
will be stuck in my mind.
A
I
lot
love
easier to forget Evergreen Compliance. I mean, it's still our legal name. It's still the
Sorry,
name of
what?
our tool.
Everyone
Evergreen Compliance.
Mhm.
just kidding you. Come on.
That,
I had
Exactly.
to.
that's the
I had
See,
compliance lady there.
yeah.
Erin, one thing that we bonded on at various events, we saw you in Alabama. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But was just your general, you mentioned it already, you love this industry. And so you love
mhm.
being involved. And we were talking about shows and everything earlier in the pre show, which still is the greatest part of the show. I'm so sorry that everyone misses that part.
We need to
But
record them.
but our kind of shared passion, and I say between all of us, for this industry and our involvement
Mhm.
in it, and we talked about some of the work that we've done and continue to do in various segments with a lot of associations, but one in particular that's I know everybody is it's the mainstream, but is the American Gas Association, and I know they have a big event coming up in May in our backyard, which I'm pumped about. We're excited to be a part of that event. Um, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes of AGA as a whole. If you remember what AGA is really about, you realize that there are a lot of folks that work behind the scenes. We talk about it, Jimmy, claiming your seat at the table, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of
Yes.
seats at the table at the end of the day. And I know you brought up a specific group that's close to your heart and that you've worked with. And honestly, it's a segment that Jim and I didn't know anything about. So,
Yeah.
and so
Ironically.
we're catching up. And so we're like, hey, we need to talk about this more. So tell us a little bit about that group and specifically what they are after.
So as a part of the American Gas Association, there's a committee called the GPTC, the Gas Piping Technology Committee, and their mission is to produce what the short version is called the Gas Guide, but the full version has the Gas Piping Technology Committee. Da 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 da. But I know they've been around for over 50 years because we had the 50-year kind of celebration at 52 years actually, because 50 years hit during COVID. But it's a committee generally around 100 people, and they produce this guide, and this guide is like 1,000 pages long, and it's exactly that. It's a guide to um, developing and implementing the programs under 191 and 192. It does not cover liquids, obviously, it's the American Gas Association. But what I found when I first learned about the guide was, we all know there's certain, sections of all these regulations that are similar between liquid and gas. So I would even use it if I was, when I worked for Alaska Pipeline, we had obviously the 800-mile oil line, but we also had a gas line. But I would even use it for that if it was something, like public awareness or something else that it didn't
Right.
really matter if it was oil or gas, and the regulations are very similar. But it's a really, really well developed guide. It's updated routinely, and the committee meets 3 times a year, so it's a fair commitment. But I don't know how that compares when people talk about being on NACE committees and stuff like that. I don't know how often they meet, but so it's a fair commitment. But and for instance, one thing that's very relevant to what's going on in the industry right now is as new rulemaking comes out, and of course, there's been such a the more rulemaking in the last 5 years than there normally is, but they
Yes.
update the guide based on that. And so that in and of itself is incredibly valuable, because I know companies and, people are struggling to kind of keep up with, there's 3 RINs from just the gas mega rule alone. There was the valve rule, and, throw a few other ones in there. And there was when the, um, gas rule regs started to be finalized, a committee, kind of a subcommittee was formed to work on the gathering rule specifically because it was such a, I mean, that had been coming for 15 years. And so they have put some of the guidance out already in the addendums, and work continues. I'm technically on the committee, but I really haven't participated that much. So I really get very little credit for any of it. The rest of the committee's really done the bulk of the work, but they will, in fact, when we go to the meeting, it's a meeting the week after next in Charleston, South Carolina. And then they stay a day afterwards and kind of work on that gathering guidance. And so so that's exactly what they do. It's a tremendous amount of work. But you have agency people, industry people, people from the trades, people from consulting and service companies, operators, and anybody can join. I think there are some specific limitations on being on what they call main body, or some of the kind of overarching parts of the committee where they
Sure.
keep the mix to a certain thing, which I think is pretty typical. But as far as the committee itself, and so I am really interested in making sure people are aware it's out there, because we love to have, the more different thoughts and fresh set of eyes you have on this stuff and people's input, the better. And just for people to be aware that this guide exists, and also suggest maybe considering working with the committee. And you can come to the committee meetings without being a member. I think you can do that indefinitely, but that's what most people do, is you come to one or two meetings
Mhm.
and then decide if it seems like a fit, and then you just put your application in and go from there.
Well,
Go ahead, James. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no,
I was going to say I sit on the LNG committee for AGA. Absolutely love it. The sharing of knowledge is intense.
It
And
is.
James often speaks about a seat at the table, and there are definitely seats at the table. And I apologize for not know. I probably have seen placards for that committee, and unfortunately, selfishly, probably I'm always focusing on where the LNG committee is being located. So I apologize, but I learned a lot with that today. One quick question of the guide. You referenced this, and did you? How big is this guide? Did you mention this before, and did I miss it? Or how big is this guide? Is it 30
It's like
pages? 20?
it's 1,000. It's a big. It's got all sorts of appendices, and
Yeah.
one of the reasons it sort of popped up on people's radar in the last year or so is, for years they had the guidance in there in one of the appendices for the leak grading, and that didn't really exist anywhere else. And so a lot of people
Mm.
would use that, and even though if you didn't have a copy of it, people would pass that around and use it in there. And of course now there's you know a lot of energy into, should we be grading leaks and should we be doing them different and that sort of thing. So that's kind of a topic, but you're right. And I will also say there's something different about the status of the GPTC committee relative to the other AGA. So they don't have, you talked about May, the big event.
Yep.
The first day is committee meetings before the kind of convention or conference starts. They don't, that's not where they meet separately, and I don't really understand what's
Mm.
different about it. I probably should know the answer to that.
Okay.
But so that might be why, if my boss hadn't said 15 years ago, I want you to go to these GPTC meetings, I would have probably not known it existed either.
that's
And so
interesting.
we're also doing a lot of outreach. I mentioned to a few people, and we've had in the last year maybe 5 people join because myself or Alice or somebody said, hey, you should come check it out. I did want to say one other thing. Oh, you're talking about the seat at the table. I am a complete geek and love all that stuff too. And when I went to the AGA in Orlando in
Mhm.
October of 21, I think,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
purposely got there so I could go sit in those committee meetings. And it's amazing. Like, even though I wasn't on any of the committees, I would just kind of wander around from one to the other and listen to what they were talking about. And because I was heavily involved with the GPTC committee, I didn't really feel like I had the bandwidth, especially as somebody with a upstart. We're still kind of getting our feet under us as a business, to
Yeah.
kind of commit to something else. But it's amazing to, like you said, see who's there and listen to what they're talking about and thinking about and get ideas. And it's very open. You don't have to be on the committee or anything. You can just walk in and sit and hear what's going on.
It's a great environment. Go ahead,
It
James.
is.
Amen. Aaron, I know also that you've got an announcement, kind of exciting thing you want to talk about in the same kind of area. and making this even easier for folks. So the floor is yours, ma'am.
Yes, we're very, in the same vein talking about the GPTC committee. We are incredibly excited because last week we finalized an agreement with them to be able to put the GPTC guide inside the tool we have. We have a tool that lets users in the industry, and that's consultants, operators, agency folks, attorneys, trades. We've kind of scraped everything off the PHMSA website and just tried to make it easier to find and use. I kind of drove everything from when I worked for operators. This was the stuff I was always looking for, but I knew that the guide was an integral part of what people rely on in, what we refer to in the framework I have as like identifying, assessing, implementing, and applying all the rules and that sort of thing. And I'd been working with them for quite a bit, but they've got a lot on their plate too. And so it finally all came together and we signed the agreement and we have the files. We're putting them in our tool. So it's just going to make it even more valuable to the users to be able to research, questions that come up during audits and improving their programs and that sort of thing. So we're super excited. Eric just got the files yesterday, so I'm not sure how long it'll take to put it in there, but he's quick and super sharp, so I'm sure it'll be soon.
I'm sure an hour, 2 hours, right?
It's just a copy and
Some
paste, right?
I tell you what, there are times with him when I think, we have an idea and I think to do whatever we've thought of. Well, in fact, one of the recent ones we did was a couple of people had asked about putting the PHMSA questions from their integrated inspection question sets in the database. So they showed up with the thing. And so we talked about it and I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a months long, effort. And it's funny because he'll go off and the next day he goes, I thought about it last night. And actually, then he talks like developer talk that I don't
Yeah, yeah,
understand
yeah,
and this and
yeah.
that and write a script or whatever, and they're in there the next day. So there's like no rhyme or reason to it. Or the things that I think are going to be quick are the ones that take a long time. But yeah,
Yep.
so we've been very lucky. But so yeah, they'll be in there soon, and I'm hoping by the time we go to the meeting in Charleston. But at least it's in the works, and I'm excited.
That's really fun. That's really fun. And I'm just laughing right now because I think I've made the comment we have a team of software engineers, quote unquote. And my comment would be, well, just copy
Quote unquote, they are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. I mean, we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's intense. And I'm like, well, just copy and paste it. And they'll give me the look.
Exactly.
You're like, well, go away, And James is my buffer. He's like, no, Jimmy, listen.
I mean, that was my world. I lived in that world longer.
You were chief
Oh, you
technology
did? Oh,
officer.
okay.
Yeah,
He was chief
I was
technology
one of
officer.
those guys writing that code for a long time of my
And
life.
had to deal with people like me. Copy and paste it.
I know.
Respect,
Well,
please.
it's funny while we were doing development and kind of laying out what we wanted everything to look like and how it was work. I used to preface everything. And remember, this was all over Zoom for the first year and a half, right?
Yeah.
And I would always preface everything and say, please understand what I'm going to ask you. I don't know if it's going to take you 5 minutes, 5 days, or 5 months. So
Please
I'm
don't
just asking a
gouge me.
question.
Yeah, please don't gouge me.
I
I'm
love it.
inconsciously incompetent. Yeah.
Because if you're
funny.
not the one doing that work, you literally have no idea.
It is
No
a black
idea.
Oh,
box.
yeah.
It's a black
No, no,
box
no.
for a
Yeah.
lot of folks, for sure.
I started to get down to the point of like, hypothetically, if we wanted this to happen, what is the process?
Yeah.
But
Well, we also put in a thing where you could he put a link in where it would kick you out to the ECFR because it'll do the red lines so you can put dates in.
oh,
And so we have the amendments, included in the tool so you can look and see, oh, this section was updated 3 years ago or something. And I wonder what it said 3 years ago.
Mm.
And we've thought about doing a whole thing inside the tool. I'm like, why would we do that? I mean, that's the other thing that I'm very passionate about is there's so much good work and stuff going on already in the industry. It's like we don't want to
yeah,
recreate things.
right.
And for as much as people love to gripe about the federal government, they've got amazing things on their website and technology.
Yeah.
And one of them is a red line function in ECFR. You can go out there and put in any two dates and it'll just go bippity boppity boop and give you a red line. And I had mentioned that a couple times and I had to laugh. And then we were on a demo with this huge midstream company and one of the guys on there mentioned it. And so the next day, Eric says, I thought about this overnight and I can actually just link that right in the tool so that if you want to see the historical versions of things, it'll send you right there. And I was laughing. I said, well, that's funny because I've mentioned that about 15 times and not a peep. And then a client mentions it, and
Yeah.
the next day we're going to put it in there.
One of the folks that reports to me told me the other day, I wait until you ask for something twice before we do anything.
Did
And
they
I
really
said, well,
say
now
that?
you're going to have to up it because now I know your trick. It's like setting
You
your own
just do it
alarm
back to back.
clock
Boom,
forward.
boom.
Yeah. It's
Aaron, I want to bring us around. This is a thing that's near and dear to James and my heart. We were blessed in December to be able to give a keynote presentation at the Alabama Pipeline Safety Conference in Montgomery, Alabama, in the
shout out.
capital.
Shout out to our
Shout
friends
out!
there.
Oh, wonderful friends there.
Amazing.
And the keynote was not typical. I mean, it wasn't like about regulations or regulators or any of that. It was thought leadership, culture, generations in the industry. But one of the topics we talked about was just do it, just get started. If you, what is it? If you can't walk, then crawl. If you can't crawl, then whatever it is. But anyways, there's a slogan in there, and a quote.
It's different. Yeah.
I'm sorry. So then I'm at the Montgomery airport, and again, we run into each other. Erin and I do. And Erin said, yeah, James, and your, really hit a nerve with me, or a chord with me. That's a better term, a chord. And I am going to start a podcast. And I'm like, wonderful. And she's like, do you think I can do it? I'm like, I know you can do it. I'm like, when are you doing it? She's like, I'm doing it next week. And I think he had it planned. And I think maybe we might have been the ignition just to get that kicked off. But a friend with a pipeline was launched. I would say, was it right around the holidays? It was right end of December, in early January.
Or mid, no, it was
Mid
December because
December.
the Alabama was like the second week of December, and I think I did it
Correct.
that next week. Yeah, yeah,
Good. Tell us about it. I
oh,
mean, I'm sure it had been in your mind for a long time, and I'm glad to know that we at least helped, get it going. So give us some story about that, because that's wonderful.
it it had been in my mind for a long time, and I was excited to see at a pipeline conference a keynote and a presentation. Like you said, we tend to get as a regulated community very
Yeah,
focused on the regulations and the rulemaking and the statistics and that sort of thing, which are all important. They're all very
Absolutely.
important,
very.
but to also focus on the people aspect of it. And we've talked, I love this industry. I love the people in it, but it's very heavily in my world anyway. I'm sure this is true everywhere. Engineering focused,
Mhm.
and not as much on soft skills, communication, and that sort of thing. And so I was excited to see that change. And I think we've talked to. I mean, that Alabama conference, there was something cool and special about it. I mean, they're all
I
amazing, but
tell you
that one,
what.
for some reason, and obviously they had the foresight to have you guys do a keynote that wasn't, on regulations or pipeline statistics and that sort of thing. And
Atypical.
Hmm.
but I also want to circle back along those lines to something else that you guys said that really resonated for me. So you're right. We ran into each other in the airport. In fact, I think we were on the same flight. We went from there to Atlanta, and
Yes, we
then
will. Yep.
and then and so I did, and I'd been thinking about it, because the keynote would have been the first day of the thing, and by the time we were all leaving was 2 or 3 days later. And I remember thinking, God, yeah, I've been literally talking about this, thinking about it for I didn't even know how long, but a long time. And I remember, and I've even got a friend up here who does communications and that sort of thing. And she always said, don't try and make it perfect because nobody wants that anyway. Like people actually like the ones that are more real. Like
Amen.
if you're all polished and you got, the stuff people are like, wah, 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 and but so yes, you're right. That I was just like, well, they're right. I've been thinking about this. I'm just going to do it. But another piece when I listened to the podcast from last week or your kind of 2023 kickoff, and you guys talked about that, and you talked about how I sent you an email and said, hey, I'm going to do this. Here's the thing. And because I talked about your keynote and that sort of thing, wanted to give you guys a heads up. And the reason I'm saying all this is one of you said, something like it was almost like she was asking permission, not that she needed permission to do it. And I find that as somebody starting off a business, there is this thing, and I've realized just in the last few months that there have been a lot of things like that where I realized I was sort of waiting for permission, which almost doesn't make any sense because, like, who would I be waiting for permission from? But you think there's going to be some official
Absolutely.
thing that happens before you do something.
Yeah.
And so we've gotten a little bolder and more proactive, I guess, and just doing the things we want to do because I realize that's absurd. And obviously, when I sent that to you guys, I wasn't really asking for permission,
No.
but
No,
it was a heads up. But it was interesting to me that I mean, it was really more as a courtesy, and I thought it was kind of cool
sure.
because you guys sort of inspired it. But the fact that that has been something that, as I've read
Pe-
and thought about, like what we're doing and how we're doing it, and just need to get out there and do the stuff, whatever it is, whether it's a podcast or anything else we're doing,
Yeah. Was it
So
deep in your mind, were you hoping somebody would stop you? Like, is there something back there that was like, maybe they'll get offended and I won't have to put this out? Like
yeah,
there's
yeah,
part of it that's it's so funny to think back at that time. I just watched it. Jim and I were actually reviewing that keynote this morning
Yeah.
and updating. And one of the slides is our first episode. Like us,
hmm
it's so funny and sad and like not sad. I just mean the time frame that we were in was sad. We were in the
Oh yeah,
first part
definitely.
of the
oh yeah,
pandemic. The only
Yeah.
reason we were doing it is because we didn't have anything else to do. We were in a room by ourselves.
nobody to talk to.
Yeah.
And
Seriously.
so when you
Therapy.
look at that now and you see it, it's so comical, to look back 150 episodes in, and look at that and go, man, I can't believe we did part two. The first one is almost more believable than number two because you're like, you watched the first one? Like, I can't
Right.
imagine who watched the first one. Probably no one. But we didn't have anything to do back then. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
So funny.
Oh,
So funny.
there's they were
Well,
so
tell
bad.
people how they can watch the podcast,
Please.
what they can do, because that's one thing is we want to promote the show too. That's part of what we do is we want to be sure to share the show, and there's enough of us. There's abundance mentality, right? That's the way we live, and so
Exactly.
how can we help support the show?
So, and I was thinking about this as I, knew I was going to be talking to you guys this morning that we keep saying I started a podcast, which I did on some level, but it's not actually on any of the podcast sites yet because I haven't
Yep,
figured out how to do that. So they're just on our YouTube
to
page,
come.
Okay,
Yep.
that's
Hey, we
fine.
can help there.
which is fine. And so we have a YouTube page, and I think if you just search that compliance lady, it shows up, or
Perfect.
there's a video on our website, and if you do that, it'll take you there. So that is one of the things we need to
Well,
get
I
it
know
actually out on a
somebody. I
podcast.
know a guy. I know a
I
guy.
bet you
You'll have
do.
to work through
That's like
Jim, though. He's level one
that's
support.
like literally my favorite phrase on earth is I know a guy. I
Yeah.
know a guy.
Oh, we live by it. Live.
I know a guy.
So, Aaron, we have a new question that we're
Okay.
asking folks this year to wrap up the show. And I know we could spend all day here. That's just how it goes. It's a
We're
sad
not.
time.
We're
Oh,
not.
I didn't want to be there. It's not you, it's me. Um, And we've been asking folks this year. It's a new season, and I know you cheated because you said you watched the one last week, so you already know. But new question this year. You ready? I want to be
I'm
sure
ready.
connection's good. It's got to travel a long way, all the way to Alaska. What does Erin McKay want to be when she grows up?
You know, if I could like I always the I do this in a lot of areas of my life. I always do the kind of like if money were no object and restraints that we think about now aren't an object, what would you be doing? And as silly as it might sound, I actually would love to be doing something similar to what we're doing now. Like if the company I have, we've got great people, bring on more great people and pass it on is like to be involved in the industry a lot of the ways that I already am, but just with more flexibility. And because I literally love going to conferences and meeting people and seeing what people are doing. And I also love, I was thinking about this morning. I remember talking to somebody years ago that was kind of like a life coach. She's actually a friend of mine, and I said, you know what I really love is I love being a connector.
Yeah.
I can't even count how many times in my life I have literally gotten people together and going, I can't articulate exactly why right now, but I think you two need to know each other. And and something may or may not ever come out of it, and sometimes it's years later, but I love that. And I love like sitting and listening to what people are talking about and going, wait, if weren't those guys talking about something? And what if we, did this and see if somebody else wanted to partner? And I love partnerships and obviously right now we do a lot of that actually. But we have to be more specific about building our business and that sort of thing. So the focus is a little bit different, but it seems to me there'd be this like amazing freedom. And if you were not doing that, to just be out seeing what's going on and coming up with new ideas. And in fact, the people I work with, I drive them a little crazy because I can come up with new ideas all the time. And they're like, simmer down, simmer down.
So you're saying you want to be Jim Shower when you grow up? That's what I'm hearing.
Either that or
He
run
also annoys us. No, I'm just kidding.
Does he?
I'm sorry. Wait a minute.
Yeah,
Yes,
wait
I
a minute.
do.
No, but I will
Yes,
say,
I do.
Erin, what an awesome outlet that
Yeah.
podcast, video series, whatever you want to call it, web series, YouTuber. You're a YouTuber. How cool is that?
Is that what it is?
It is a great outlet for that.
Yeah.
I would guess, I don't know. Have you ever done a Strengths Finder report like from Gallup? I'll send you information on it.
Yeah.
I wonder if
A
connected
what?
Strengths Finder.
Strengths
Yes,
assessment.
I have. I have done that.
Do you
I
have
have done that.
connectedness
Yes.
in your top 5?
And I think that's the one, like my number one is maximizer, where the definition is you take things that are good and you want to make them better.
Yeah.
And so yes, I have done that, and everything in it rang completely true. Rang completely true.
Very cool.
There was something else I was going to say about the connecting and stuff, and now I've lost my train of thought, which happens often. But
Well, welcome to podcasting.
yeah,
You're
exactly.
official now. Just wait till you're mid-sentence and the whole thing flies off, and you're the host.
That usually happens to me.
And Jim
Yes.
has to jump in and save you. That's
That's
why
a
you get a
problem.
co-host. Aaron.
That,
Let us
it
know.
does work that way, though. Hey, that yin and yang, brother. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we really want to do with this, I mean, we've been a little inconsistent about doing them, and part of it is I had things lined up, and then I'm going to see people in a few weeks in person, and we're like, oh, well, let's just do them then in person. So, but one of the things I'm really excited about is there's so many things that come up, and I think this is kind of our little niche that are, things that are happening currently in the industry. Like right now they're doing all these 114 inspections, and our whole kind of focus is, I used to always say, we're answering the same question in the industry 1,000 times a day. And especially with these smaller companies, it's like, why are we doing that? Let's have somebody dig in and kind of put out some information about, we just had a few people get a hold of us about, like the agencies asking about disadvantaged communities, and it kind of came out of left field. And how does that relate to pipelines? And so I was on the phone yesterday talking to some people from the agency and other operators to kind of just put something out there and say, here are these questions. Here's what we found out. Some of the databases aren't publicly available yet, but just to kind of save, like I always say, no blank sheets of paper. At this point in this industry, nobody should be doing anything from a blank sheet of paper. And if we can provide just a little guidance, and I think that's kind of our little, kind of our niche is to see these things coming up, because people call us all the time from operating companies, or consultants call us and say, hey, I've got a client and this is going on. Have you seen this in other places? And to be able to kind of get ahead of it. And we refer, and I don't see us as any competition. I mean, we refer people to people all the time, and we're not trying to replace anybody, but just provide some guidance. And then, like, yes, now go have an attorney or consultant or somebody help you with this, but just help direct them, because things are changing so fast right now.
Yeah, be a resource in that discussion. Well, Aaron, we appreciate the work that y'all do. We appreciate
Absolutely.
you reaching out to us and telling us that story. Jim and I were talking this morning, and we're going to work your story into our story that we just gave, because it's such a nice little cherry on top, and it validates some of the work that Jim and I do, whether you know it or not.
Nice.
Like,
Yeah,
Mhm.
that
absolutely.
email hit in a very, very important spot for us. It
Nice.
filled our cup, so we appreciate that. And Erin, anything we can do, we appreciate you, and let us know.
Okay. Well,
and
I'm sure I will see you several times this year.
Oh, we
we'll
will
probably
see
be
you.
booth mates,
Absolutely.
I'm sure. We'll be on the road together.
And I'll make sure you know where the party is at LGA.
Yeah, because I'm in a closet again.
It's next to Jim's room. Go follow Erin on LinkedIn. Go
Please.
to thatcompliancelady.com. Also, I'm gonna call it a podcast because we're gonna fix that problem too.
Yes.
We are.
Well, you can be listening to it on there and share the show. Let's get it out there. Let's make a difference.
Knowledge sharing. Have a good day, everybody.